You won't believe what just happened. Let me tell you, this is where it gets really interesting. Pastor John Gray, a man who has been caught in multiple cheating scandals, stood in front of his congregation and declared that he was finally free. Yes, finally free. He said he had been unwrapped, unlocked, and unleashed. But here's the shocking part. Just a few weeks before this powerful speech, he was drowning in deep emotional turmoil, admitting to suicidal thoughts and battling demons from his past. So the question is, how did he go from rock bottom to complete transformation in just a few weeks? Is this truly a miracle, or is there more to the story? For years, Pastor John Gray had been caught in an endless cycle: cheating scandals, public apologies, and promises to change. People forgave him, trusted him again, and then, boom, another controversy would shake the internet. It was like watching the same movie play over and over again. But this time, things were different. Gray was not just making another apology. He was making a bold claim that he had experienced true deliverance. He said he had finally put barriers in place to make sure he would never go down that road again. His words were powerful, his voice full of conviction, and his congregation cheered. But for many, this felt all too familiar, and this is where it gets even crazier. Just weeks before making this declaration, Gray had posted a deeply emotional message on social media saying, "I am not okay." He admitted that he was struggling. He even revealed that he had thought about ending his own life. He painted a picture of a man who was completely broken, overwhelmed by guilt, and trapped in a cycle he couldn't escape. His followers were heartbroken for him. They sent prayers, support, and encouragement. But here's the part that made people suspicious. Right when the internet started buzzing about another scandal, suddenly Gray was making a public confession, shifting the focus to his pain rather than the allegations. This is where it gets really interesting. Right when Gray was talking about his deep pain and healing, an Atlanta-based celebrity blogger, Tasha K, was teasing a huge scandal involving him. She hinted that an adult entertainer had proof, actual receipts, that Gray had been engaging in explicit online activities behind his wife's back. And just like that, it all started making sense. Every time a scandal was about to surface, Gray would get ahead of the news with a dramatic public confession. But was this really a man crying out for help? Or was this just another carefully planned distraction? But the craziest part, Gray had been here before. Every time he got caught in a scandal, he would step in front of his congregation, filled with emotion, and tell them how broken he was. He would cry, promise to change, and declare that he was a new man. But the question was, how many times could he make the same speech before people stopped believing him? This time, the allegations were even more damaging. If the receipts were real, if Tasha K had proof, then no amount of emotional preaching would be able to save his reputation. But here's where everything took a wild turn. Just as people started questioning whether Pastor John Gray was truly a changed man or just running the same playbook again, something unexpected happened. His wife, Avontere Gray, stepped forward. And she didn't just stand by his side like before. This time, she was different. She wasn't just the supportive wife holding his hand, nodding along to his apologies. No, this time she had her own message, and what she said left everyone stunned. Avontere spoke with fire in her voice. She made it clear that she was no longer the same woman who had stood beside him through his past scandals. She said she had reached her breaking point. She admitted that she had given him chance after chance, hoping he would finally become the man he promised to be. But now she wasn't just fighting for her marriage, she was fighting for herself. And that was something no one had expected. People in the congregation looked at each other, confused. Was this the beginning of a separation? Was she finally done? The energy in the room shifted. And then, boom, the internet exploded. People started dissecting every word she said. Some believe she was still playing the role of the devoted wife, trying to hold on to a broken marriage for the sake of appearances. Others thought this was her warning shot, a way of telling the world that she was no longer covering for him. But then something even more shocking happened. Avanter wiped her tears, looked straight into the camera, and said, "This is not just about my husband. This is about all of us." Wait, what? All of us? What was she trying to say? People started speculating. Was she hinting at something deeper? Was this a subtle way of saying that the church itself was part of the problem? That maybe John Gray wasn't the only one hiding secrets? Because let's be honest, whenever a powerful pastor falls into scandal, there are always whispers about what happens behind closed doors. Could this be bigger than just one man? And while all of this was happening, Tasha K was still teasing her bombshell revelation. She promised to drop undeniable proof, messages, videos, and screenshots that would expose the real John Gray. The internet was holding its breath. Was this going to be the final nail in the coffin? Or was Gray going to find a way to escape once again? And just when people thought things couldn't get any crazier, Tasha K finally dropped the bombshell. It wasn't just one piece of evidence, it was a flood. Screenshots, voice messages, even a video clip. The receipts were undeniable. John Gray had been talking to another woman. And it wasn't just harmless conversation. The messages were explicit. He had promised her things, sent her gifts, and even talked about meeting up. The internet went wild. People who had defended him before had no choice but to admit this wasn't looking good. But here's where it got really messy. The woman involved, she wasn't staying silent. In fact, she came forward herself. In an exclusive interview, she spilled everything. She claimed John had told her he was unhappy, that he felt trapped, that he wanted out but didn't know how. She said he made her feel special, like she was the only one who truly understood him. But then, the moment things started to get serious, he ghosted her, stopped responding, blocked her number, like she never even existed. And that's when she decided to expose him. Meanwhile, Avanter Gray had gone completely silent. No Instagram posts, no cryptic messages, nothing. People were watching her page, waiting for a response, but she wasn't giving them one. That silence, it only made the speculation worse. Was she finally leaving him? Was she too embarrassed to speak? Or was something bigger happening behind the scenes? At the same time, John Gray was scrambling. He released a statement calling the allegations misleading and taken out of context. He said he had made mistakes, but that the media was twisting the story. But here's the thing, no one was buying it this time. He had used the same excuse before, and people were tired. And then, out of nowhere, Avanter finally broke her silence. But what she said, no one saw that coming. Avanter didn't come back with anger. She didn't come back with tears. She came back with power. Her first move wasn't a statement. It wasn't a live video. It was a single chilling post, a black screen with white letters that said, "The truth always comes out, watch God." The internet exploded. People started analyzing every word, trying to figure out what she meant. Was she exposing him? Was she planning to leave? Or was she standing by him once again? The suspense was thick. But before anyone could even process it, she went live. And when she appeared on the screen, she wasn't the broken, humiliated wife people expected. She was calm, collected. But there was a fire in her eyes. She took a deep breath and then said, "I need y'all to hear me." For the next 15 minutes, she told her side. She admitted that she had been hurting, that she had spent sleepless nights trying to make sense of it all, that she had been praying for guidance. But then she dropped the bomb. This wasn't the first time she had been through this. And it wasn't just one woman. There had been several. People watching the live gasped. She had never admitted this before. She had always defended him, always told people that their marriage was strong. But now she was letting the truth bleed out. And then she said the words that shook everyone. "I'm done. The chat exploded. Wait, what? She's leaving? Oh, this just got real. Aventer didn't cry. She didn't stutter. She said it with certainty. She had forgiven him before. She had stood beside him before. But now, she wasn't going to carry his sins anymore. And while the internet was still trying to process that, John Gray made his next move. And trust me, no one saw this coming. John Gray didn't stay silent. He couldn't. Less than an hour after Aventer's live, he posted a video of his own. But unlike her, he wasn't calm. His face was tight with emotion, his eyes red. He sat in the dimly lit space of what looked like a hotel room, his hands clasped together like he was begging for mercy. I have failed, he began, his voice trembling. I have failed God. I have failed my wife. I have failed my family. And I have failed all of you. For the first time, he wasn't making excuses. He wasn't blaming the devil. He wasn't twisting scriptures to soften the truth. I have lived a double life, he admitted, shaking his head. I have preached one thing and done another. I have broken the trust of the woman who stood by me when I didn't deserve it. People watching were stunned. Was this real repentance? Or was this just another attempt to win sympathy? Then John did something that had never happened before. He confessed everything. He spoke about the messages, the inappropriate conversations, and the times he crossed the line. He admitted that there was more to the story than what people knew. And then he said the words that sent shockwaves across the internet. My wife has left me. Silence. The comment section froze. No one expected this. Aventer had always been ride or die. She had always stood by him. But now, she was gone. John ran his hands over his face, his body shaking. I deserve it, he whispered. I don't blame her. I don't blame anybody but myself. For a moment, he just sat there, the weight of his choices crushing him. And then he dropped his final bombshell. I am stepping down from ministry indefinitely. The internet broke. Some people praised him. Others called it damage control. But one thing was certain, this was the beginning of the end. Or at least that's what everyone thought. Because while John was drowning in guilt, Aventer was making moves, big moves, the kind that would change everything. Aventer wasn't just leaving, she was building. While John sat in his grief, the world started seeing a different side of Aventer Gray. The quiet, supportive pastor's wife had transformed into a woman on a mission. She had been silent for years, standing in the shadow of her husband's pulpit, but now she was stepping into the light. Days after John's confession, Aventer made a move that no one expected. She launched her own ministry, not a small Bible study, not a support group, a full ministry, complete with online services, speaking engagements, and partnerships with some of the most powerful women in the church world. She wasn't just moving on, she was rising. The media exploded. Headlines swirled. Aventer Gray breaks free, thriving without John. First Lady, no more. Aventer Gray becomes a leader in her own right. John watched from the sidelines, helpless. For the first time, he was the one being left behind. And then the final blow came. Aventer went public with something that sent shockwaves through the church world. She revealed that this wasn't the first time she had been ready to leave. She had packed her bags before. She had almost walked away before. But every time, John had pulled her back in with promises, apologies, and public performances of guilt. This time, she was done. I stayed for love, she said in an emotional interview. I stayed for my family, but this time, I'm staying for me. Her words echoed across social media, sparking debates, discussions, and a movement. Women who had been silent for years began to speak out. Pastors' wives, church women, even everyday wives in struggling marriages started sharing their own stories. Aventer wasn't just leaving, she was leading. And John was alone. His church crumbled. Membership plummeted. Speaking invitations disappeared. The same people who once cheered for him now turned away. He had always been the one holding the microphone, the one in control, but now he was watching as his wife became everything he was supposed to be. The tables had turned, but the story wasn't over, because just when it seemed like Aventer had finally broken free, one phone call changed everything. The phone call came late at night. Aventer was sitting in her new home, scrolling through messages from women who had been inspired by her story. She was exhausted but fulfilled. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. Then her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to pick up. The voice on the other end was shaky. It wasn't John. It was someone from the church. "You need to come," they said. "It's bad." Aventer closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. She had prepared for this moment, the moment when John would break under the weight of everything he had lost. But even as she braced herself, she wasn't ready for what she saw when she arrived. John was a wreck. The man who once commanded thousands now looked small and defeated. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He had always been a big presence, larger than life, but now he was just a man, a broken man, sitting in the ruins of the empire he had built. He looked up at her, and for the first time in years, there was no arrogance, no excuses, no deflection, just raw, painful honesty. "I lost everything, Avent," he whispered. His voice cracked. "I lost you." She stood in the doorway, unmoving. She had spent years waiting for him to understand what he had done, waiting for him to see her, really see her. And now, standing in front of him, she realized something. She wasn't the same woman who had waited. She had grown. She had healed. She had found herself. John reached for her hand, but she didn't move. Tears welled in his eyes. He had spent so long believing that she would always come back, that no matter what he did, she would always be there to pick up the pieces. But now Aventer looked at him with pity, not love. "I prayed for this moment," she admitted, "for you to finally see me, to finally understand what you did." John nodded, a single tear rolling down his cheek. "Do I still have a chance?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Aventer took a slow breath, feeling the weight of his question. Once, she would have said yes without hesitation, but this time? She turned, stepping back toward the door. "You had so many chances," she said softly. "This time, it's my turn." She walked away, leaving John in the silence of his empty church. And as she stepped into the night, she realized she wasn't just leaving, she was free.